Ashtavakra Gita, chapter 1, verse 9. Burn down the forest of ignorance with the fire of the conviction, I am the one pure consciousness. Discard all grief and be happy. The sage is saying, I am one pure consciousness. We saw in previous verse, that is in chapter 1 verse 8, the sage said, if you identify yourself as a doer, then it's like getting bitten by a black serpent and it's poisonous. If you want to check and listen to the previous verses, I have added the playlist link in the description where all the verses are present. If you are identified with the ego I, then it's false. And anything false is impure. We will have to leave this ego I identification, who is feeling that I did it, I got it, I am the reason for it, blah blah blah. All the stories that this ego I is creating, leave behind. And the sage is saying, pure consciousness is what you are. And he is reminding us again and again. Whenever the sage says pure, it's an opportunity for us to see if anything is feeding our ego or letting us free. When the sage is saying, I am one, he meant there is no diversification. There is no other at all. Let's try to understand with an example over here. Say, if we have to do an investment, like we will diversify our investment. It would not be just on one, right? And the reason for it is, like, there's no certainty. If one goes off, at least there'll be something else, right? And similarly, if I'm applying for an admission to college, it would not just be one, because I don't know if I'll get through that, right? So whenever there are many, that means that there is no certainty. And many are found in this world. Many are actually what we are seeing, what we are experiencing through our senses. The one, what the sage is saying, is the one beyond all this without any identification. The sage is repeating that you are one pure consciousness many a times. It's not just in this verse, we have seen this in the previous verses also. And this is very much required. This reminding is very much necessary. We have discussed this in the previous chapter, but I wanted to reiterate on it, that our mind, the nature of the mind, is to escape this truth and run away. And that is one of the reasons why the sage is trying to remind us in all different ways. You know, we would have seen even with these reminders, it's very much possible that the mind just keeps slipping away. And hence, this repetition is necessary, and sage is very aware of this. So he is purifying us by this repetition. So whenever sage says you are one pure consciousness, he is not actually adding one more identity. Like, say, you are a doctor, you are an engineer, you are a farmer or a sports person, and on top of that you are one pure consciousness. No, that's not the context here. So whenever sage says you are one pure consciousness, it's an opportunity for us to see who I am. It's an opportunity for us to negate everything that is false. I am one pure consciousness. With this fire of conviction, burn this forest of ignorance. Here the sage is referring to forest. What's the significance of forest here? He's just trying to say that the ignorance is so huge. Back then, the forests were very dense, right? Or even today, like if we consider Amazon, few places might be so difficult, so dangerous, so scary to enter. And if you are lost somewhere, you might not find the way back, right? That's the reference that we get when we are talking about forest. So even this illusion of ego or ignorance is also the same. You will not find anything here. An illusion can add more illusion if you are looking inside an illusion, right? Like say if you are in an illusion, then it is highly possible that you will be creating more illusion if you are trying to look through that illusion, right? So the sage is saying, please burn this at once with the pure fire of conviction that I am the pure consciousness. The sage is saying, whatever false has been acquired and whatever false has been identified, burn them at once with the fire of conviction that I am pure consciousness. Discard all grief and be happy. We will have to understand the words of the sage more deeply over here. When he says discard grief, he meant to discard the kind of happiness which will be in danger all the time. Like in the fear of don't know when this happiness will go away. No, discard all of them. So the grief, so if we just look at the grief, like the grief is not the starting point, right? Like we would not be just in grief. It would be, the grief would actually be a reason of something else. The sage is pointing towards that source from where this grief has been arrived, and remove that, discard that one. If we just look at the grief, then we are not actually working. We are not working on that. So we are actually inviting something else. So the sage is saying, look at that happiness which has led you to this grief. And that is false happiness. Don't get caught with it. Discard all of that and be happy. And this happiness, what the sage is saying that be happy, he is talking about immense joy, which is not dependent on anything. Leave this grief behind. You have no relationship with this grief. The kind of joy which is not bound by anything is what we are interested in. This is possible only when the false is removed or ignorance is burnt. So the sage said, ignorance has to be burnt and grief has to be discarded. So he's actually saying both of these things together because they both are closely related. Hence, the false or ignorance has to be burnt and grief has to be discarded. And there would only be bliss. So he's saying when we say ignorance, it's like I don't know who I am first. Like if I don't know my situation, what am I looking outside? What will I know? What will I understand? Ignorance doesn't mean that lack of knowledge of scriptures or lack of knowledge of technology or science. No. It's about not knowing the self. So remove the false and you are in joy.